Thanks, Dwayne. Thank you. Inspiring keynote this morning. I've been reading stuff that this guy, Gene Spafford, or Spaff, has been posting online since the 80s. And it's always been interesting and fun and a little bit thought-provoking and a little bit annoying sometimes, which is okay because, it's not comfortable to get pushed out of the habits that you've been forming, and that can be a good thing. So today we're going to talk about reducing the attack surface, not service. Attacking is not a service. I'm going to tell you who I am, and we'll talk about what we're going to discuss in this presentation, a little bit about why it matters, and then I'll summarize it and take questions. It's pretty straightforward, pretty much what we do in our 50 minutes that are allotted to us. So who is this guy? I'm David Frier. All those letters after my name are silent, except when it comes time to pay the annual maintenance fees. They're not silent at all then. I work as a virtual CISO, not really in the scope of this talk to explain what that is, but essentially I'm a security consultant that goes around from client to client and consults on their security. And I work at Sidara, which is a great cybersecurity managed security service provider and cybersecurity consulting firm based out of Buffalo. I commute from Rochester to Buffalo one day a week, but I am primarily a Rochester guy. And I do not, in this talk, I do not speak for Sidara. I may take some positions in this talk that Sidara wouldn't even agree with, and then I'll go argue with my guys about that. I've been doing information security for years, and I've been in IT from the bare metal on up. I started with operating systems, internals, and assembly language for 20 years. I avidly play poker. I'm an Orioles and a Cubs fan. Moment of silence for the Orioles playoffs. And I'm the enthusiastic but very slow rider of a Trek. Oh, by the way, the numbers I gave up there were in base 22, so you can figure out the actuals. They say you have to have a personal brand. I've decided my personal brand is Geekosaurus. So I had AI, of course, because it's what all the cool kids are doing, make me a drawing of a Geekosaurus, and that's my logo now. All right, on to the meat of the thing. What is this all about? So we're going to give you the definition of attack surface because you will find more and more security tools out there referencing attack surface, and you should know what they think they're talking about, and then you can tell them if it differs from what they're actually saying. We'll talk about the components of your organization's attack surface. There's probably more to it than you think. You need to find out what your attack surface is for sure. And I put the scare quotes around for sure because, as Spaff so ably pointed out, we aren't yet really sure of anything in cybersecurity, but we're, an approximation to it. And then what are you going to do? What are you going to do about your attack surface now you know more or less what it is? I'm going to go briefly into the kinds of tools that are out there. I'm not really going to talk about any particular product. Frankly, I haven't yet taken enough time with the actual products to give an intelligent opinion on them. But the other thing is, as you'll see, they're kind of absorbing into other larger scope tools, so it may not even matter that much. All right, attack surface definition. An attack surface, and this is just basic, it's the total set of vulnerabilities your organization exposes to the world. Now that sounds kind of, easy and trivial, but you have to remember your organization is not just the sum of all the technology that it possesses. There are people, there are processes that are functioning, and they can also include vulnerabilities that aren't covered in a scan of a website or something like that. Few processes that our organizations run are fully automated, or none of us would have jobs, right? So you have to remember, we're going to talk about the digital and the physical aspects of attack surface, including humans. Employees can be coerced, employees can be turned against the goals of the organization one way or another, or simply they could be the victim of a crime and then data assets can be stolen if the employees had them in their possession at the time. Some of the non-cyber areas of attack surface are a little beyond the scope of this talk. I'm not really going to get into, how to protect employee data when it's on their laptop in their car and they're out driving around. I mean, full disk encryption. Okay, but we know that, or we don't know that, but it's not really in the context of attack surface management. We're going to focus mainly on the digital vulnerabilities with a little bit of talk about things like remote workers. So digital components include our company's web applications. That's the most obvious thing. That's the thing you get pen tested all the time and so on. But also the mobile applications that we may put out in the world as a company. Those too can have vulnerabilities, and the back ends that those applications communicate to can have vulnerabilities. Cloud, right? Everything as a service. You've got infrastructure as a service, so there are vulnerabilities there in the way that the firewalls for the virtual private clouds are configured. If you put a software as a service product out there, then of course it has some vulnerabilities to it. APIs. This is one of the toughest areas of this approach to doing attack surface management, is understanding all of the things that you're opening yourself up to by surfacing APIs, including APIs that you document to the world and say, hey, everybody, come use our service. Here's the API. It's easy. You put these post commands and you get these great results. But it's also, there are hidden APIs that developers include to give themselves tools to diagnose how things are running and so on. There are also third-party products that you may incorporate into your products that have their own APIs that you're not even aware are there. Shadow IT. In many organizations, especially somewhat larger organizations, people get annoyed waiting for IT to do something that they want, and then some manager will pop out a credit card and sign up for Dropbox or some other available service to get something done, and you have no idea. IoT stuff. If you have a physical plant of any scope, you probably have HVAC in that physical plant. It is probably controlled by little devices that are connected somehow to the internet and go back to the service provider for your HVAC. So you have at least that much IoT exposure. We will get into that a little bit more. Then there's everything your remote workers connect to, including the junk in their homes, the Samsung refrigerators that leak Gmail credentials to the world. Why refrigerators have Gmail credentials, I don't know, but they do it. Little Danny's Minecraft server, and so on. Then there's the physical side. We have data centers. They may have internet connections that have vulnerabilities. They may have physical access to them that's not completely secured. Our offices are usually only somewhat secured. Yeah, you might need a badge to beep in, but who 100% never lets anyone tailgate them into an office. Any portable or mobile devices, laptops and phones and tablets that hold company data, they go out in the world, they can get stolen, they can get lost. If you run vulnerability scans and you think it covers everything on this list, you're kidding yourself. And you can look at the list and see plainly that there are many things that are not in the scope of vulnerability scans. So you need something more, and that's where we get into attack surface management. That's where we get into how we're going to know our attack surface for sure. Because if you don't know about it, you can't defend it, right? That's the argument against shadow IT and these other things that are more obvious. But there are also some more hidden items. So the first thing you got to do is inventory everything. I mean, asset inventory is the starting point of just about any information security effort, right? I call it the root of many trees. There are all kinds of things that you can do in cybersecurity to improve the security posture of your organization, but none of them can function well if you don't have a decent asset inventory. So I'm going to ask you to inventory everything. I'm going to tell you that discovery scans are not enough to find everything because it won't find your cloud accounts. You've got SaaS accounts, you've got platform or infrastructure as a service, you've got servers up in the cloud, you've got microservices that don't even use servers up in the cloud. You got to find all that and get it into the inventory. You need to know all the APIs that are running on your organization's infrastructure. And that includes the APIs that you've created, the APIs of products that you use that are surfaced maybe by default and you need to disable them or at least account for them. There may be hidden APIs built into APIs that you know about. In other words, suppose you have a third-party library that you use in your product and it has an API. And you like that API because it helps you do some things, some cool things with your mobile application. There's a documented set of calls that you can make it to that API, and you have the documentation and give it to all your developers and everybody's using it and happy with it. And there are, I guarantee you, additional calls that can be made to that API that aren't in the document. The developers of that third-party product put them in so they can check on their product and see if everything is going well and see if, and if you call in with a tech support issue about the API, then they'll use some of those calls to help diagnose and fix your issue and get you back running smoothly and all that good stuff. But that's also possibly attack surface. There may be vulnerabilities in those hidden API calls that nobody knows about and nobody's scanning for. Shadow IT, as we already talked about, managers pop out a credit card and buy whatever service they need to bypass the normal IT process and the bureaucracy as they perceive it. You've got to find that. IoT stuff. I call it Internet of Crap, but I won't have it in my home. If I get an item that behaves like an IoT device, I first see if it will function the function that I bought it for without having any network connection, not even to my internal network, certainly not out to the internet. If it won't do that, I'll probably return it. But if it will, like I have an LG TV, it's a smart TV, it has no internet connection, it's functioning as a 76-inch display, and it's fine. I understand if I had a Sony TV, I wouldn't even be able to get through the setup without giving it an internet connection. Guess what? I didn't buy a Sony TV. I recommend that kind of behavior to everybody. Most people think I'm kind of a nut job and go on and buy their stuff and hook up their washing machine to the internet. I don't know why, but they do it. Anyhow, my IoT rant is a topic for another day too. And hybrid and remote workers. They add additional attack surface to your organization because they take company devices home and then work from there, and then they're on their home network that probably does have IoT stuff attached to it, so you can figure out what goes on there. You can do this inventory by hand. You can get a tool to help you with it, but you have to have an inventory. So let's talk about APIs. Now, further down this slide presentation, and this will be available to anybody afterward. It'll be on the conference's website, and if you send me a message somewhere, I'll shoot you a copy of it. There is an article on how to find hidden APIs. It is an article written from a red teamer or pen tester point of view, so it's kind of it takes an offensive security. It's like you are approaching an unknown or a black box or a gray box situation, and you see there's APIs, but there are probably more APIs than what's documented, so how do you find them? And it gives you exact techniques in the browser to do that. It does not require a lot of technical ability to execute those techniques. It is really tedious looking from what I've seen, to execute those techniques completely, but it's going to be worth it to complete your inventory of the hidden APIs. I will tell you that if you go looking for an attack surface management tool or attack surface management features in a larger tool, and it doesn't include elucidation of all the hidden APIs in your organization, you have the wrong tool, find something else. You need to make sure that you're paying attention to the APIs your organization built and the APIs that are put out there by third-party tools that your organization uses or includes in your product. Third-party products will usually have undocumented APIs. I think you can pretty much count on that. You're going to have to hunt them up to test them for vulnerabilities because your discovery scans are probably not going to find them. All right, let's talk about that shadow IT stuff. So this is a big problem. A lot of IT managers are trying to crack how to approach shadow IT. I don't have the magic bullet for it, I'm sorry. But you're going to know that you may have a great asset inventory. I guarantee you it doesn't include your shadow IT assets because someone has explicitly kept that knowledge away from IT who assembled the inventory. So how will you be able to find all of that? I have some ideas about that. I don't claim this is the magic bullet to find all the shadow IT. I know it's a tough problem in IT management, but awareness is the first step. I would say look at firewall logs for your on-prem networks to see if there's, for example, if you don't, as a corporation, use Dropbox.com, but you see calls to Dropbox coming from a bunch of your assets, you've got some shadow IT. Box.net, Box.com, they go to the same place, but they're shadow IT for you. And there are a lot of shadow IT providers, but you should know what services you use officially. Look in your firewall egress logs for unofficial services that are also being used. The other thing is, if you make it an adversarial relationship, your employees will try to find ways to more cleverly hide their usage of shadow IT. So try an amnesty program. In other words, talk to the employees and say, look, it was against corporate policy, you're in violation if you're using it, but there will be no punitive action. Instead, let's bring it into the light so that we can help you use it more safely. And if you take that approach, you may get some good results. I think that shadow IT usage is going to be easier to find if it's happening from on your premises. If it's happening from remote work, then it's going to be virtually impossible. Amnesty might help a little bit with those folks, but it becomes a kind of a spectrum from using shadow IT to malicious insider. So it's a different kind of investigation you may have to run for that.
David?
Yeah.
Accounts payable can also be a great source for finding applications or services that were bought outside of IT.
That's true. If a person who's using shadow IT sets it up as a vendor and runs invoices to the accounts payable, and you can find those. But the other thing that you will often see with shadow IT, because the expenses can be quite small, is it's simply put on some manager's credit card and expensed as something very generic sounding, and so you don't get the full information that way. Like I said, it's a difficult problem, and I don't have an absolute solution I can offer about shadow IT. Internet of Things. Internet of Things are mostly going to be on-premise things, so it may be somewhat easier to get a clear picture if you apply all the right techniques. You can run discovery scans that will find IPs that don't correspond to your servers and your user endpoint machines. IP addresses that nobody really owns, not nobody, okay? So it's not that IoT junk has no owner, but it will have owners that tend not to interact as much with IT. So what I'm saying is, if you, say, are running a typical corporate environment and you have a sales force, and so they're going to interact with IT because you do some kind of sales automation or tools to help them, manage leads and make calls and track orders and build proposals and whatever. And you have an accounting group, and you know that they're looking at the general ledger. But you also have a facilities team, right, who take care of the building. And they're usually like, you guys in IT, we don't care, we just do our thing. You're going to have a transportation group maybe who drive a van that takes people between the buildings. Or if you're a school district, I work with a bunch of school districts. If you're a school district, you've got bus drivers who go get the kids and bring them to school and take them home. And there's a garage and they fix buses there, and there's a couple of systems that they use, but they may have other stuff too. So food service as well, it's the same kind of thing. They'll have stuff that they bring in that's equipment to them, helps them get the job done, and they don't even realize that it has an IT impact. But when the people from the vendors came to install it, they say, oh yeah, we need your Wi-Fi password. And they say, sure, here it is. And they give them a Wi-Fi password, and the next thing you know, you've got some refrigerator phoning home to China 4 times a day, right? So that's why they'll not have an owner in the traditional vulnerability management sense, where you run a scan and you divide it up by the owners and you give each owner their things to remediate, and then you follow up to see if they ran their patching and all that. It will have a way to get to the internet, because that's the whole point of the IoT device. I'm gonna say that it may be phoning home. The probability that it's phoning home is 1.0, unless you have explicitly blocked it. Your IoT stuff that's in your buildings will be phoning home, and it will be sending home all the information that it can reasonably gather. So the other thing to know about when IoT stuff is phoning home is if the manufacturer, whoever they are, wherever they are, China, North Korea, who knows, if they get pwned, you get pwned, because the actors who pwn an IoT manufacturer are not really looking to pwn that manufacturer. They're looking to pwn all that manufacturer's customers. So the malicious code will be passed down back to your IoT device that phones home faithfully 4 times a day like it's supposed to, and be in your infrastructure next. IoT devices exist to spy on you. They need to be isolated as much as possible, okay? When I say IoT devices exist to spy on you, I think that all the evidence that I need to be stating that as fact, you can see in the web pages of Best Buy and Newegg. Best Buy, you can buy a 55-inch 4K TV for $280. At Newegg, you will pay $3,000 for a 55-inch 4K monitor. What is the difference? The monitor doesn't need to be connected to the network, and the TV does. So where is that disparity being made up? In the money that the manufacturer thinks they can make by stealing information about you. If again, I mentioned this before, if a device that comes into your building can be isolated from accessing the internet and still work, then you should keep that device and let it do its job. And if it can't get on the internet, it probably can't hurt you nearly as badly as it could otherwise. If it needs to be on the internet to function at all, you have a fun decision to make, because that's going to be a conversation with somebody like your facilities manager, who's just put in a new HVAC system, and they need to be able to control the heating and the air conditioning in the building. I wish they'd make it warmer in here. And you're telling them, well, you can't use that functionality of the system, and it's completely useless to them without it. So it would be great if they would include IT in those kinds of conversations ahead of time, but they don't. All right, let's talk a minute about hybrid and remote workers. So they're taking the company computers home, they take them to coffee shops, they connect to you via a VPN, and they're split tunneled because everybody split tunnels because everybody said, I connect my computer to work and now I can't print. So, you know, who hasn't, who raise your hand if you haven't heard that. No hands, thank you. I mean, you have to manage not to create a bridge between your worker's computer and your corporate network and little Danny's Minecraft server, right? With whatever security flaws that, oh, it surely doesn't have any. Wait, no, it probably does. Just remember, as you have this conversation with your remote employees, that a good compromise is one in which nobody is completely satisfied. You're probably not going to get to a good compromise about split tunneling. I would put forth that most workers who think they need to print at home don't, but you know, not everybody is trying to live the paper-free lifestyle that I'm trying to live. And even so, I mean, I bought a laser printer 3 years ago. I think I've printed 20 sheets in it so far, but that's not zero. So. All right, so this is what to do about your attack surface. And I'm wording it in kind of a way that it can be like a little mantra and you can memorize this quick little 7-item list. Find it. Asset discovery and inventory. Prioritize it. It means do threat modeling against the things you find and figure out which ones would have the biggest impact if they were compromised, which ones have the most vulnerabilities or threats in the landscape that can affect them. And so those are the ones you need to try and remediate first. Then assess it, scan and test, but everything you found, you have to make sure that you are testing all those hidden APIs for the same vulnerabilities that you're testing the public APIs for, and so on. And then reduce it. Remediate, fix the vulnerabilities where you can, apply the manufacturer's patches like we're all told to, like good little boys and girls, but also minimize. Minimization is the principle that, you know, you may put websites up there. If you have a company blog and you're doing it in WordPress, you're opening yourself up to probably a 4-digit number of CVEs that aren't being fixed quickly because it's 8 million little add-ins that, you know, get maintained once every 2 years if they need it or not, and so on. You could be putting that company blog up with Jekyll, and if you haven't heard of that, it's spelled just like the guy in the story, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And let me tell you, the attack surface of your blog site goes from huge to nothing in a minute because Jekyll just generates static HTML with your content and you put that in behind port 80 and 443 and you're done. And you surface no point for attackers to latch onto. Then separate it. So everybody, and I know of some very large companies that have big flat networks and everything can talk to everything, and you know, if you think about it, you realize not everything ever needs to speak to everything else, and you could create many, many little VLANs that can isolate functions where they belong, and then you can write firewall rules between them, but you know, that's a lot more work. And if the network wasn't really designed, but it just kind of grew over a course of a month or two or a decade or two, depending, then it's probably pretty hard to implement now. But the more you can isolate things from one another, the better. Especially if you have IoT things, you really need to consider creating a VLAN just for IoT items so that you can isolate them from that internet access that you don't want them to have at all. Then watch it, monitor, oh, question?
So if you isolate it from the internet, right, vendors maybe do a better job than others, but how do you get it updated?
So you can, I have an item at home that needs network access because it's a LAN disk, but I don't let it go to the internet because the manufacturer, QNAP, not to mention any particular names, but QNAP, has a terrible track record of getting pwned, and they almost got me 2 years ago. Story for another time. I download the updates from QNAP and apply them when I think I need one. So far, I've done that once, and it bricked the device for about a day until I managed to jiggle the handle enough to get it started again, and I haven't done it since. Anyway, my point is that unless the device is not functioning within your network the way you need it to, leave it alone. I would say that's one that you don't need to be patching all the time, because a lot of the patches that you get from the manufacturer just improve the spine. So, you know, use your discretion. I'm not advocating for not patching things. Don't come out of this and say, David said not to patch stuff. I don't have to patch things anymore. Well, guess what? You do. But, you know, IoT devices that are isolated, and if they're functioning properly, and, you know, they could tick along like that for 5 years, and then they're obsolete, and you buy another one, and you have the same problem again. But you may not have to update it all the time. I mean, QNAP puts out an update a month. So far, I've had this thing 7 months, and I've skipped 6 updates, and it's running fine. So it's doing what I need it to do. That's really the ultimate fitness, you know, fitness test of a device. It's doing what I need it to do. All right. All right. Watch it. So this is where a lot of the ASM tools really help, is once they have that inventory of all of your attack surface points, they're constantly monitoring them and comparing them against new vulnerabilities that may be published. So you definitely want to be able to do that. I mean, at this point, we've gotten through, you know, another side topic, for a story for another day, is I'm currently pursuing a certification in risk management, not information risk management, but just generic risk management. It seems to involve a lot of buying insurance. Anyway, the risk management cycle is IAMM: identify, analyze, mitigate, monitor. There it is in 6 steps. Identify and analyze, mitigate, and monitor. And then finally, again, ASM tools help with this, and ASM tool features built into new, larger products also help with this. You can automate a lot of these steps so that the inventory of the attack surface is kept up to date on a periodic basis automatically, and so on. So let's talk about these tools for a minute. There are 2 basic kinds of attack surface management tools in this market: external attack surface and cyber asset attack surface management. EASM looks at your perimeter to the extent that anyone still has a perimeter, but it looks at externally exposed to the internet devices and looks for additional attack points that a typical vulnerability scan might not find. CAASM tries to look at your whole infrastructure, internal and external, including your mobile assets. And so it's kind of a superset of EASM. Gartner, of course, gave us a quadrant. Thank you, Gartner. Thank you for another quadrant. So this is kind of interesting, because if you see this, and it's kind of small, I'm sorry about that, but it's tools that are security tools that aren't explicitly ASM tools, but the companies that run these tools are buying ASM tools from niche providers. For example, Tenable bought a tool called Bit Discovery to add external attack surface management to Tenable's already pretty commodity vulnerability scanning service. I mean, they're solid and they're great, and I love using it because it's easy to understand and what you're doing and to get the results you want. But it's pretty commodity. So they're trying to spice it up a little, so they added some attack surface management to it. IBM, which, I don't know if you know much about IBM, what it's like there. I interviewed with IBM one time, and they said, you have to understand, people in the public think IBM is this big monolith. IBM is really like 941 companies in a trench coat pretending to be one company. So they bought this company, Randori, to get cyber asset attack surface management into their arsenal. The market for attack surface management tools as such is kind of a moving target, but look for attack surface management features in other tools. And so this grid, and you'll be able to see it better when you get the PDF of the slides that you'll get, is all the different kinds of security tools that are adding attack surface management features. So at the end of the day, why does this all matter? Some smart person once said, if you don't know about it, you can't defend it. Oh wait, that was me. If you already do vulnerability scans, you may think you're all set, and you're scanning everything except that vulnerability scans, the way vulnerability scanners work, I don't know, maybe Tenable's better now because they bought Bitdefender, is going to cover everything, but there are absolutely aspects to your attack surface that a typical vulnerability scan, and by typical I mean the way Tenable that you're thinking of works, okay, without this additional functionality that it can't cover. So, are you a compliance or are you a security? Because if you're a compliance, it's like, remember the commercials, are you a PC or are you a Mac? And the Mac was the cool, cute guy, but the PC was John Hodgman, and it was like the typical stodgy thing that everybody does. Because, how many people in this room work in an environment where the computer they give you is a Mac? 3, wow. I've asked my employer for a Mac numerous times, and they think I'm very funny. How many get a Windows machine? Yeah, that's everybody. So it's the same thing with compliance and security. Many companies approach their information security by saying, well, here's a list of things we have to do, and we're going to check this, we're going to check that, and we're going to check that, and we're done. And if that's how you're approaching security, then you're not going to think about attack surface because you're not really thinking about, what are the ways I can get hurt? You're thinking about, what do I have to do to get all the boxes checked so I can go to the bar at 5? But by ignoring the attack surface principles, if you think about especially the IoT exposures and the API exposures from third-party libraries, you're bringing other companies' vulnerabilities into your vulnerability picture. So do you really need that? Do you really need that responsibility? Everyone was running around last year to do their software bill of materials. Anybody here had to participate in some of that? I'm seeing heads nodding. All right. How about an enterprise bill of materials? Anybody want to take that on? But that's what you're taking on when you use these products and you don't pay attention to what they're doing for your attack surface. So, I'm going to summarize. I will now make everything as simple as possible, but no simpler, to quote Albert Einstein. Find all the things. Be sure to be searching for all the types of things. Reduce all the things as much as possible. Isolate all the things as much as practical. Maybe get a tool to help you with all the things. Automate all the things. That's it. That's attack surface management. I did a lot of reading to put this all together. I picked some of the best as a reading list. When you get this, those will all be hot links, so you can go right to the articles or PDFs involved. The OWASP cheat sheet, if anybody here is familiar with using that, they have a great item on attack surface management. That's one I'll call out. The Gartner chart came from one of these. Paladin Cloud sets out very nicely the process. They put it in 6 steps instead of 7, but that's because they combined 2 that I separated. It doesn't really matter. This is your part.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
What can be done when you're in an environment where your corporate security and product security are, I won't say less than cooperative, but the overarching compliance and mandate aspect seems to crush the product security, secure development lifecycle aspect. Say they're, just hypothetically speaking, let's say that the corporate is saying, we mandate these 2 tools to check our boxes, just like you
Right. They're a compliance.
where the product security says, we want to use as many tools as we can to get a, as broad of a spectrum of responses so that we have accurate coverage and we can help develop it, But the corporate won't accept the scans from the tools that they don't approve. How do you bridge those gaps?
So what I'm hearing is that product security wants to use additional detection tools to either develop the inventory or find the actual vulnerabilities. And corporate security is saying, well, these aren't on our official tool list, so we're not having it. All right. What I would say there is that product security could take it one step further and just run those tools, find the additional issues, and fix them. I mean, that's the way I would take it. And, if that means altering the schedule or increasing the budget or probably both, then somebody at the top of the product security food chain needs to make that case to the C-suite, because there are potential, depending on what the product does, there are potential even liability issues. So now it becomes something that it's not just an information risk management problem anymore, it's a corporate risk management problem. And when you get those guys interested in a problem, it gets fixed. Anything else? All right. You can get in touch with me lots of different ways. I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Mastodon, I'm on LinkedIn, sorry. I have an About Me page. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, that's Nope Cubed. You can also try to run me down in real life, and we can talk. Thanks everyone for your attention. It's